now we're pleased to bring you our feature presentation.
In 1993, Paramount Communications entered the theme park space by acquiring the King's Entertainment Company and its parks. At the time, the King's Entertainment Company were a significant player in the industry, with 6 amusement parks around the world, these being Canada's Wonderland in Toronto, Kings Island in Cincinnati, King's Dominion in Doswell, Great America in Santa Clara, Carowinds in Charlotte, and Australia's Wonderland in Sydney. The owners were interested in selling after a few years of slow growth. Paramount would assess each of these parks and decided to acquire the 5 parks in America.
However, they passed on the Australian park,
citing low growth in the local industry as a reason for them not to undertake the task of
operating the park remotely. While Paramount passed on the opportunity, this wouldn't be the last time that the company dabbled in the theme park space in Australia.
For much of the 20th century, the Docklands in Melbourne was a hive of industrial activity. Located 2 kilometres west of Melbourne's Central District, its many wharfs and extensive heavy rail infrastructure made it the hub for shipping activity for Victoria. However, as the 1990s rolled around, things changed in the shipping industry. The containerisation of shipping traffic made ports in major capital cities unnecessary, and soon Docklands fell into disuse and was effectively abandoned. The Victorian government believed that the urban renewal of the prime inner city land was the way to go, following the example of Sydney's Darling Harbour or Brisbane's Kangaroo Point. And so, starting in the mid-1990s, Docklands began its decades of change, with the Victorian government making a deal with the AFL to construct a stadium in the area. Soon after, a movie studio and theme park facility, not unlike what was being built elsewhere in Australia, would call the Docklands home. In 1986, Dino De Laurentiis constructed the studio complex on what was once swampland in Oxenford on the Gold Coast, which was at the time a fast-growing tourist destination. The studio complex would initially only last a year until De Laurentiis' company went bankrupt. However, the complex was purchased by Village Roadshow the following year. Village Roadshow would then purchase a large parcel of land right next to the studios, developing that land into the Warner Brothers Movie World theme park, which opened its doors in 1991. In the mid-1990s, the New South Wales government was preparing to close Sydney Showground in Moore Park. Sydney was due to host the Olympics in 2000, and as part of the Olympics complex they were building out west, the government would allocate a large chunk of the land to a new showgrounds area, and so tenders were called to operate the old showgrounds. The government would appoint Fox to construct an entertainment plaza, theme park and studio complex on the site in 1996. Back in Melbourne, the Victorian government had given the Studio City Consortium the rights to develop an entertainment facility on a 29-hectare parcel of land in the Docklands, which was used as rail yards. It was a slightly smaller site than Village Roadshow's studio and theme park precinct on the Gold Coast, but was much bigger than what Fox was planning. The Studio City company was seemingly well financed. It was backed by Viacom, the new owners of Paramount, paper company Vicey, the Wynn Television Company and Macquarie Bank. The park's rides and attractions were to be quite extensive, bearing a lot of similarity to the Paramount parks in America. They included a Top Gun themed Vekoma Flying Dutchman, an S&S Space Shot Tower inside a water tower, a wooden roller coaster, a Vekoma Boomerang coaster themed to Mighty Mouse, a simulator attraction themed to Star Trek, a Nickelodeon themed kids area, a sky coaster, and a 50-metre tall Ferris wheel with the Paramount logo at its centre. Like all movie studio theme parks, Studio City would also include a studio bus tour. Similar to what Fox was doing in Sydney, Viacom would build an entertainment precinct named The Wharf. The attached development would include a 16-screen cinema, more than 25 restaurants, as well as eateries, nightclubs, and live venues. $500 million would be spent on the project in total, with construction beginning by the end of 1999, with an expected opening date of September 2001. The process of financing began in 1997, and initially things looked like they were going to move, until they didn't. In 1999, the Fox Studios Backlot Park in Sydney opened to the public. Despite housing some impressive attractions, including a $50 million Titanic walkthrough experience, the park was tiny, and from the perspective of a guest, there was little to do. From day one, the Fox Studios backlot struggled to get visitors through the gates. With Fox's park dead on arrival, investors that were initially warm towards Studio City were scared off. Fox Studios executives went to the media to criticise Viacom's predictions for visitor estimates, which didn't spark confidence in potential financiers. Speaking of Viacom's outlook on the park, it was, to put it lightly, very optimistic. Viacom believed that the park would make profit in its first year, because that does happen, and that they had predicted about 1.8 million people a year would visit the Studio City complex, a figure that they had labelled a conservative estimate. This figure was well over what the Gold Coast theme parks were getting at the time, and half of Melbourne's entire population. Yeah, by the end of 1999, in a last-ditch attempt to get public financiers, Viacom would work out a plan to publicly list the Studio City company, but their efforts were to no avail. Studio City executives first tried to get Australian banks who were not interested in the project anymore, then flew around the world to meet with international banks, many showing disinterest in the project. And by May 2000, with a lack of new investors for the project, Studio City was dead. The company was wound up, and the project was officially cancelled. Investors may have been right to cast their doubts on Studio City. In 2001, Fox Studios backlot closed its doors, just 2 years after it opened its gates to the public. By the time of Studio City's demise, nothing had occurred on the property to speak of. The land that the park was to be built upon wasn't even cleared. The park's attractions and rides, which had been ordered by the time the company was wound up, were moved around the Paramount chain or sold off. One of these was the Top Gun coaster, which was part of an order for 3 identical roller coasters from the rides manufacturer Vekoma. While one of these was built for Paramount's Great America, the other 2, including the one destined for Studio City, were sold off to Six Flags. Viacom, who owned Paramount at the time, eventually split its operations 6 years after Studio City's cancellation. The Paramount Parks division went to the new CBS company, who immediately sold the amusement park operations to Cedar Fair, ending the Paramount name in the theme park space after 13 years. While the theme park never happened, this isn't to say the studio project never materialised. Construction would eventually start on a studio elsewhere in the Docklands, being completed in 2004. However, this would be done without the involvement of Viacom, nor would it have a theme park included. The property which Studio City was intended to be built upon remains undeveloped to this day, being used for the same purpose that it was 25 years ago.